Okay, so most of us, we've heard of the Odyssey, right? This epic story about a hero just trying to get home. But have you ever stopped to think about why it took him 20 years? I mean, 20 years, that's a long time. Well, the answer actually starts in a different story, a brutal 10-year war that came before any of it. So how does a war that lasts a decade, a war that involves gods and heroes, how does something like that even start? Well, you might be surprised. It doesn't begin with an army or a big declaration. Nope, it all kicks off because of a promise and a stolen queen. This, right here, is the story of the Trojan War. Think of it as the prequel to everything Odysseus went through. All right, let's dive in. Section 1, a war over a promise. The pact that launched 1,000 ships. And it all begins with one person, Helen. We're talking about a woman so beautiful, her looks were considered a threat to the peace of all of Greece. I mean, that's where we get the saying, right? The face that launched 1,000 ships. This is her. So you gotta put yourself in her father's shoes. So many kings wanted to marry Helen that he was terrified a massive war would break out no matter who he chose. He was totally trapped. If he picked one guy, all the losers would probably team up and attack him. A real no-win situation. But then, along comes this clever, kind of under-the-radar king named Odysseus, and he has an idea. And here's the idea. It's called the Oath of Tyndareus. Odysseus proposes this super clever pact. He says, look, make all of Helen's suitors swear an oath to defend the marriage of whoever gets chosen, no matter who it is. It was an absolutely brilliant political move, right? It turns all these rivals into allies. And in exchange for this genius idea, what does Odysseus ask for? Not money, not land. He just wants to marry Helen's cousin, Penelope, who wasn't as famous but was incredibly smart. That tells you everything you need to know about Odysseus. He valued brains over beauty, and that's a theme you're going to see again and again. So what happens next is like a series of dominoes falling. First, Helen gets married to King Menelaus of Sparta. All good. But then, Prince Paris of Troy shows up, and he and Helen elope. They run off together. So what does Menelaus do? He invokes that oath. He calls on every single one of those former suitors to keep their promise. And just like that, an army is assembled to sail to Troy and get Helen back. A personal problem just became an international crisis. And everyone, including Odysseus, who probably just wanted to chill in Ithaca with Penelope, is now forced to go to war. The stage is set. Okay, section 2, gods and heroes take sides. Because this wasn't just a human conflict, oh no. See, this whole mess had been simmering for a while, and not just down on Earth. It was also brewing up on Mount Olympus, among the, let's be honest, pretty petty and squabbling gods. And their divine drama was about to spill over onto the human world in a big way. So here's the divine backstory. It all starts with a golden apple, right? It's tossed among the goddesses, and it's inscribed for the fairest. Classic troublemaking. The choice of who's the fairest falls to, of all people, the Trojan prince, Paris. So he has to pick between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Talk about pressure. Each one tries to bribe him, but Aphrodite's bribe is the best. She promises him the world's most beautiful woman. He takes the deal. And the consequence? Well, that woman was Helen, so the two goddesses he rejected, Hera and Athena, are furious, and they vow to see Troy burn to the ground. You have to get this. The Trojan War is basically a proxy war for the gods' vanity. They weren't just spectators. They were active players picking teams. And this really breaks down the teams for you. It's like a cosmic draft. On Team Greece, also called the Achaeans, you've got the big heroes, Achilles, Agamemnon, and our guy, Odysseus. And their divine backup, Hera and Athena, the two goddesses Paris snubbed. Then you have Team Troy. Their champions are the brothers Hector and Paris, and in their corner, Aphrodite, who started this whole thing, and Apollo. So you've got this massive division, a true clash of titans with both humans and gods ready to go at it. All right, on to part 3, 10 years of stalemate. A whole decade of just brutal, inconclusive fighting. So the Greeks land on the shores of Troy, and they are confident. They're thinking, hey, we'll be home by dinner. They figured with their huge army and legendary heroes, this would be a quick one. Yeah, they were very, very wrong. 10 long years of a futile war. Think about that. For an entire decade, neither side could get the advantage. The massive Greek army just could not get through Troy's incredible walls. But at the same time, the Trojans couldn't push the Greeks back into the sea. It was just this awful, grinding, bloody stalemate. And in the middle of all this, the war really gets focused on the rivalry between two guys, the Greek champion Achilles and the Trojan champion Hector. Their motivations couldn't be more different. Achilles, he's all about glory. He wants his name to live forever. But Hector, he's fighting for something real, something he can touch, his family and his home. The whole epic poem, the Iliad, it's not even about the whole war. It's mostly about a few weeks in the 10th year, and it's all about the massive, explosive rage of Achilles. The rage of Achilles, sing it, goddess. That's the very first line of the Iliad. And get this, his rage wasn't even at the Trojans. It was at his own boss, Agamemnon, over an argument about pride. So Achilles just storms off and refuses to fight, and without him, the Greeks start losing. Big time. The only thing that brings him back is when his best friend is killed by Hector. Then Achilles returns in this whirlwind of vengeance, kills Hector, and basically seals Troy's fate. But the war is still stuck, just fueled by all this grief and ego. Okay, so let's move on. Section 4, the mind that won the war. Because when brute force fails, you turn to cunning. After 10 years of this, even with a literal demigod like Achilles fighting for them, it was crystal clear that just being strong wasn't going to be enough to win. Brute force had completely failed. I mean, for a decade, the Greeks had thrown everything they had, all their best warriors, at the walls of Troy, and got nowhere. They needed a new weapon. But not a bigger sword or a stronger spear. They needed a mind. And that's where Odysseus comes in, the man of cunning. He's the king of Ithaca. He's not the strongest guy out there, not the fastest, but he is, without a doubt, the smartest and most resourceful. His real power was his mind. If Achilles was the muscle of the Greek army, Odysseus was its brain. He was the guy who could find a way through when everyone else just saw a brick wall. And he came up with a plan that wasn't about strength at all. It was about pure deception. And here it is, the legendary Trojan horse strategy. Step 1, the trick. The Greeks build this giant wooden horse and hide their best soldiers inside. Step 2, the fake out. The rest of the Greek army pretends to sail home, leaving this horse just sitting on the beach. Step 3, the bait. The Trojans find it and think, hey, a victory trophy, let's bring it inside. So they pull it right inside their supposedly impenetrable walls. And finally, step 4, the end. That night, the soldiers sneak out, open the gates for the rest of their army, which had just sailed back, and Troy is completely destroyed. It was an absolute masterpiece of psychological warfare. It played on their pride, their relief, everything. So in the end, the war wasn't won by the strongest warrior. It was won by the smartest one. And with that, we get to section 5, the longest way home. Because victory was not the end of the story. With Troy in ruins, the 10-year war was finally over. The Greek heroes who were still alive could, at last, head home. Troy has fallen. The war is over. And for most of these guys, the trip back home was supposed to be the victory lap, the final chapter to a really long and painful story. But for Odysseus, the journey, well, it was just beginning. See, those gods who were picking sides in the war, they weren't done yet. They were really offended by how brutally the Greeks sacked Troy, and Odysseus specifically, who maybe got a little too proud of his clever plan, managed to earn the personal, vengeful wrath of Poseidon, the god of the sea. Not a good guy to have angry at you when you have a long boat ride home. So when you add it all up, here's the cost of that victory. 10 years fighting a war, and then another 10 years just trying to get home. That's a 20-year total absence from his family and his kingdom. And that journey home, that is what would become the stuff of legend, the Odyssey. So, you see, the end of one epic story was just the beginning of another. The Trojan War was the fire that made Odysseus a legend. But his journey home, that was going to be an even bigger test. So I'll leave you with this question. After you've survived a decade of war against the greatest army on Earth, what could possibly be worse? Well, the answer is a 10-year trip battling monsters, sirens, and the full-on rage of a god. And that is where the Odyssey begins.
All right, let's jump right in. When you hear the words ancient epic, you probably think of gods and monsters, right? Huge battles, all that stuff. But Homer's The Odyssey, it's different. It's actually one of the first and maybe one of the greatest stories about something we can all relate to, the struggle to just get home. So to really get how big a deal this was, you got to look at the story that came before it, the Iliad. The hero there, Achilles, his whole thing was seeking immortal glory. He was totally fine with dying young as long as people remembered his name forever. But the Odyssey, it just flips the script. It gives us this new kind of hero, Odysseus. His goal isn't to die a hero's death. No way. It's to live, to survive everything thrown at him, just so he can make it back home to his family. So the Trojan War's over, right? But for Odysseus, the real fight is just getting started. This trip home, it takes 10 long years. And it's not a straight line from A to B. The way the story is told is, honestly, kind of mind-blowing for its time. It's all flashbacks. We actually meet Odysseus when he's already deep into his journey, and then he tells us how he got there. So we're right there with him, looking back at his past, while he's desperately trying to secure his future. All right, so Odysseus' journey isn't just about sailing from place to place. Each stop, each monster, it's a test. It's a deep dive into what makes us human. Let's dig into his first major challenge to see exactly what I mean. Okay, so first up, the Cyclops, Polyphemus. This guy is a monster, a giant who's all about brute force, totally uncivilized. Odysseus and his men are trapped in his cave, and he's literally eating them one by one. Awful. So what does Odysseus do? He doesn't try to outmuscle a giant. Instead, he uses his sharpest weapon, his brain. And he comes up with this incredible 4-step plan that's all about cleverness and trickery. And here's the absolute genius part. That fake name, Nobody, it's perfect. Because after Odysseus blinds the giant, Polyphemus starts screaming for help. His Cyclops buddies run over and ask, "Who's hurting you?" And all he can yell back is, "Nobody is hurting me." So what do? They just shrug and leave. It's an amazing trick. But, and this is a big but, as Odysseus is sailing away, his ego takes over. He just has to shout his real name. A huge mistake. Because it turns out the Cyclops' dad is Poseidon, the god of the sea. Not a guy you want on your bad side. So now he's got the sea god himself gunning for him, and his journey becomes this gauntlet of temptations. Every single one is designed to make him forget his goal, to make him give up on going home. You've got the lotus eaters with their fruit that makes you forget everything. Then there's Circe, the sorceress, who offers pleasure but literally turns men into pigs. And then, the big one, the nymph Calypso. She offers him the one thing every other Greek hero wanted, immortality, a perfect life in paradise. And Odysseus, he says no to all of it. So, how does he beat all this? Well, his run-in with Circe is a perfect example of what some thinkers have called calculated reason. It's this idea that you use logic to control your emotions to survive. So instead of falling for her magic, he uses a little divine help and basically turns the whole dangerous situation into a business deal. It's almost like a modern negotiation, right? He puts his personal feelings aside to get what he needs. He agrees to be her lover for a year, and in exchange, he gets his men back safely and crucial info for his journey. He's always thinking, always calculating. And then you get to the Sirens, which is one of the most famous parts of the story for a reason. Their song is so beautiful, it's deadly. To get past them, Odysseus tells his crew to plug their ears with wax so they can keep rowing. But him, the leader, he wants to hear it, so he makes them tie him to the mast of the ship. Now, just think about what's happening here. The laborers, the crew, they're completely cut off from art and pleasure just so they can stay productive. And the boss, Odysseus, he gets to experience it, but he's literally tied up, completely passive. You see what's happening? Everybody loses. In this system, everyone is totally alienated from having a real, genuine human experience. It's this incredibly powerful critique of a society where everyone is just stuck in their role, disconnected from the things that actually make life worth living. So, after a decade of all this, monsters, magic, gods, Odysseus finally makes it back to Ithaca. You'd think, great, story's over. But nope, his biggest fight is still ahead of him, and it's right in his own home.
He gets back, and what does he find? His home is not his home anymore. It's been taken over. We're talking 108 arrogant guys trying to marry his wife, Penelope, basically eating him out of house and home. And they're not just being bad guests. They're breaking this sacred Greek rule of hospitality. This isn't just an insult to Odysseus, it's an offense against the gods themselves. So, with a little help from the goddess Athena, he doesn't just burst in sword swinging. No, he's way smarter than that. He disguises himself as a weak old beggar. Why? Because this lets him walk right into his own palace without anyone knowing who he is.
He gets to see firsthand what's been going on, and more importantly, he gets to test everyone, to see who's still loyal and who's a traitor. He takes all the insults, all the abuse, just watching, waiting, and setting his trap. The perfect moment arrives when his wife, Penelope, who is just as clever as he is, announces this final challenge. She says she'll marry any man who can string her husband's legendary bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. And that's the signal Odysseus has been waiting for.
So one by one, these big, strong suitors try to string the bow, and they can't even bend it. They fail, completely humiliated. Then the old beggar asks for a turn. Everyone's laughing at him, mocking him. And then he picks up the bow. He strings it like it's nothing, like a musician tuning an instrument. And then he makes that impossible shot perfectly.
And just like that, the disguise melts away. It's Odysseus. He and his son Telemachus have already locked the doors. And then he unleashes this absolutely brutal, calculated revenge. He slaughters every single one of those 108 men. This isn't just blind rage. It's been called the madness of reason. A terrifyingly efficient, violent plan to restore order not just to his house, but to his entire society. So, monsters, magic, a whole lot of bloodshed. After 3,000 years, why are we still talking about this story? What's the big takeaway for us today?
See, unlike a lot of other myths that are about finding some lost paradise or a fountain of youth, the Odyssey's big lesson is that the ideal world isn't somewhere out there. The real adventure, the most important fight, is the one to protect and fix and build up our own world, right here, our home, our community.
I mean, think about it. Odysseus is offered everything a person could want. Blissful ignorance, endless fun, even the chance to live forever as a god. And he turns it all down. His entire 10-year struggle is laser-focused on one thing, getting back to his real, imperfect, messy, but meaningful life that he built.
And that's why this ancient story is actually about your life. It leaves us with a question that hits just as hard today as it did 3,000 years ago. It forces us to ask ourselves, what is our Ithaca? What is that sense of home, that place of purpose and belonging that we're fighting to get back to? And what are we willing to go through to get there?